You're 39 and you have a business card that says crisis counselor, and that's even true. It's just that the word crisis, in your case, covers so much territory that normal counselors won't go in there without a lawyer and a gas mask. The phone rings between midnight and 5 in the morning because the entire Hollywood dump generates 90% of its garbage during those hours. The apartment is in West Hollywood, not bad. 2 windows on Sunset, $800 coffee machine, nice couch. A normal person's place, except that a normal person doesn't live in it, because you're home about as much as a conductor is at his station. You come in, change clothes, take a nap, leave. There are 2 unwashed whiskey glasses on the countertop, both yours, and that's the full extent of your personal life. You grew up in Glendale, in an Armenian neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and everyone knew someone who could get, decide, arrange, divorce quietly, without a single piece of paper, on a handshake and a word. My father fixed other people's cars in a 2-space garage. He couldn't afford his own. Mother worked at a dry cleaner on Brand Boulevard, the same one that brought in clothes from the Burbank studios, suits costing her a month's salary, with stains they didn't ask about. You grew up on the border of 2 worlds. A world where people worked with their hands and solved problems by calling the right person, and a world that shimmered over the hills, on the screens, on the billboards of Sunset Boulevard, as if behind glass. You didn't want to be on the other side of the glass. You wanted to be the door. Law school at Loyola, not Harvard, not Stanford, but enough for the California bar exam. First 3 years, Kessler and Fain, a small law firm in Beverly Hills, the lower tier of the industry, not the stars, but their servants. Contracts, non-disclosure agreements, small claims from people who slipped up on the set and wanted 20 grand for keeping quiet. The boring paperwork where you learned a skill more valuable than any diploma. Seeing how a car works from the service entrance, the accounting department, the insurance policies, and the fine print on page 23 that no one reads. Then Latham & Cole, a bigger firm, a Wilshire office, a clientele that made my mouth dry for the first month. The same names on the billboards, and different cases, not a bruise on the playground, but harassment, and not 20,000, but 2 million for signing an agreement that guaranteed the story would never come out. You were the errand boy for the senior partners who dined at Nobu and decided other people's fates between hot and dessert. Your job was something none of them wanted to do. Driving around at night, talking to people who were crying or screaming, picking up things from hotel rooms, standing in waiting rooms and making sure none of the staff took a picture of a patient. Dirty, exhausting work for $120,000 a year, good money for a guy from Glendale, and paltry for a man who knew what you knew. And then there was the night after which everything went downhill. The phone rang at 3:12, a Saturday, April 2012. One actor's personal assistant, a guy named Tony Suarez, the voice of a man sick with fear. The actor and a girl of 22 shut themselves in the guest house of a Bel Air estate around midnight, with 2 bottles and a bag that would have been enough for 4 people. By 3 o'clock, they'd had time to fuck and bicker and fight. He pushed, she hit, he hit harder, she flew into the coffee table, broke the glass, cut herself, saw the blood, and locked herself in the bathroom with a razor. She cut shallowly and crookedly, her hands were not obeying, but there was enough blood to cover everything: tiles, sink, towels, floor in the hallway. The actor found her and called Tony, because he couldn't do anything else. By that time, he was sitting on the kitchen floor, doped up to the state of furniture, swaying and staring at one point with glazed eyes. Tony called everyone whose number he had, both senior partners, no answer. 2 associates from Crisis Communications, one dropped, the other didn't call back. Another mid-level one, phones off. 5 numbers, 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning, silence. Tony got to the end of the list and dialed you, the last one. You picked up on the second ring. He arrived 22 minutes later. The girl was breathing, but there was so much time between breaths that every time you think it's the last one. You can't go to the ambulance. The ambulance is the report is the police are the lunchtime tabloids. You called arson, A cousin on your mother's side who'd lived in Glendale for 20 years and knew everyone in LA worth knowing and half the people you didn't. Arson didn't ask any questions, said, "Wait," and called back 12 minutes later with a number. Boris Katz, a private doctor, the kind that takes cash, keeps no appointments, and will come at any time of day if the call comes from the right person. Arson was the right person. Katz arrived half an hour later with his suitcase and a nurse, sewed up the wrists, pumped the girl, didn't look up once the whole time, and billed $15,000 in cash. You were the right man now, too. While Katz was working, you dialed Arson again. You needed a cleanup, the kind of cleanup that a forensic scientist wouldn't find anything after. Arson knew the type. An hour later, two men were working in the guest house, silently, gloved, with their own chemistry. Blood was everywhere, the bathroom, the hallway, the walls, the doorknob, the girl grabbing at everything as she walked. The driver took her to a private clinic in Encino, the one that takes cash and where patients go without last names. You put the actor on the couch, poured coffee, and said what you'll say dozens of times later. Nothing happened, you weren't here, you slept at home, you know nothing. By 6 a.m, there was no trace of that night. On Monday, the senior partners at Latham & Cole found out what had happened on Saturday and what would have happened if no one had picked up the phone, and the office got very quiet. Their client, their responsibility, their number in Tony's phone. One of the partners, the one who dropped the call, took you to lunch a week later, talked about the weather the whole lunch and never mentioned Saturday, but paid the bill and shook your hand like he was thanking you for something he couldn't say out loud. And then Neil Brennan called, the manager of the very same actor, the man who had helmed 36 careers and whose name worked like a password in certain offices in Los Angeles. Breakfast at the Chateau Marmont. The short, balding man ate his omelet with small, precise movements, as if he were performing surgery. For 10 minutes he asked about family, neighborhood, job, casting without a camera. Then he pushed his plate away. I need a person on a permanent basis. Not a lawyer, there's plenty of lawyers. A man who picks up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning and makes sure everything's clean by morning. You're the only one who picked up the phone, and in my world, that means more than a diploma. You asked him how much. He gave you a number and something in your stomach flipped, not from greed, but from the realization that it's not carpets that get cleaned for that kind of money. You said yes. By 2015, a half dozen of Neil's clients and 5 more on recommendation, through third hands, quiet whispers, because in this business there is no advertising, there is only someone else's horror, which ended well, and someone's name, transferred to the ear at the right moment. Business card, solo practice, crisis counselor. You paid your taxes faithfully because not paying taxes in America is a stupidity that smarter people burned on. It's just that income on paper is more modest than in life, and the difference was deposited in places the IRS doesn't like to get to. You knew things that would make a normal person sick. An actor who collects awards and pushes speeches about equality goes to the same house in Palm Springs every other Thursday, and what happens there, you've learned not to articulate even mentally. The director, whose last movie took the Palme d'Or, did something to an aspiring actress in a Montreal hotel in '98, and she's no longer acting, living in Vermont and taking lithium. A producer who has financed half of independent film in the last decade is getting money from people who make the Mexican cartels look like a Cub Scout troop next to him. It all lay inside like lead, heavy, quiet, shared with no one. The job looked different every time, but the essence was the same. A call at 2 a.m. The producer's wife found a video in his office in which the husband and 2 girls, and not staged, and the girls are clearly not in a state to give consent to anything. The wife is hysterical, threatening the police. You sit down with her in the kitchen of their house in Pacific Palisades and talk for 2 hours while the husband sits upstairs and his fear seeps through the ceiling. You don't threaten. Threats are for amateurs. You explain calmly that it won't do this to him, but to her, to the children, with everything she'll have a year from now, when the papers are gone and she has to live with that last name for the rest of her life. You speak softly, almost sympathetically, and the ugly thing is, the sympathy is real, You really feel sorry for her, and yet you take the will to resist out of her, gently, almost tenderly. By morning, she's signing the papers. A house, a bill, and silence for life. Call from Neil, clear, we're clear, or 3 months later. The rapper whose name is on every station likes to fuck on and likes to hit not before, not after, but during. For him, it's the same thing, and the girls he picks up usually know what they're getting into, and this one didn't. A broken nose, a knocked-out tooth, bites on her neck and ribs, and she's in the Cedars-Sinai emergency room wrapped in a hotel robe because he tore her dress. You decide quickly. There's a nurse's shift in 4 hours, and the new one might be the kind of person who reads TMZ and knows how to use a camera. 25 years old, model, from Ohio, 2 years in the city, same dreams as everyone else. Swollen face and hope in her eyes. She thinks you're here to help her. You are, but you're not here to help her. You name a sum of money she's never held in her life, and by morning she's off to Ohio with a new nose at the client's expense and a silence she sold without realizing how cheap it was. You have a rule, developed over the years: don't look at them as people. Clients are functions, problem generators that generate money. Victims are the variables in the equation that need to be solved before dawn. Cops, the price list. The detective in the Hollywood precinct you call captain, short, mustachioed, with the eyes of a tired dog, picks up an envelope once a month and calls every time one of yours hits the system. An arrest, a complaint, a warrant request. You'll know before the case hits the desk, while you can still come, call, decide. But the rule works exactly until it stops. January 2016, Neil calls. One of his clients, a producer, has a girl in a house in Malibu. Dead. An overdose, Neil says. But you hear the pause between that word and the next, and in the pause, everything fits. Maybe it's an overdose, maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't matter, because she's lying there, and the producer isn't calling the police or the ambulance, he's calling Neil, and Neil is calling you. Pacific Highway, night fog. Somewhere between Santa Monica and Malibu, the same thought circles around like a finger on the rim of a glass. You're 39, and you're on your way to remove a dead girl from the home of a man who makes more money in a year than your entire Glendale neighborhood makes in a generation. And you feel nothing, and that nothing is what scares you more than anything else. It's a glass house on a cliff, the kind of house they print in architecture magazines. The producer is in the kitchen, barefoot, in a white t-shirt. He's 52 and looks 45. Expensive dermatologist, personal trainer, diet more expensive than your rent. His hands aren't shaking, and he's got a look of irritation on his face, like he's brought the wrong car in from the showroom. The girl's upstairs on the bed. Cocktail dress pulled up to her hips, bruises on her throat, on her wrists, and more in places you wouldn't describe even to yourself, and you can see everything about her. What was done to her and how, and the word overdose from her conversation with Neil sounds just like it sounds, like a lie. Her lips are bluish, like frost-bitten fruit. She's 20, maybe 21. Dark hair, pretty young face, the kind of girl who comes to this town by the thousands. Katz arrives, examines, shakes his head, writes a certificate. The brigade threw arson. They already know your voice. A bag of powder from the table, a black clutch with a Nevada license. In 2 days, that name will go on the missing persons report. Girl from Vegas. Came in for the weekend, didn't come back. Vegas won't be surprised. 4 hours of work. By dawn, there's nothing left of her, as if 20 years of someone's life could be erased in one night and an envelope to the right people. Stopping at a convenience store on the way home. Jingle, the white light of the lamps after the darkness of the highway. Pasta in a container, bourbon, coffee. There's a girl at the register. Dark hair, coat, wine, and dessert, smiling in passing like normal people smile at other normal people on a normal Sunday morning. And it hits you because she's 20, maybe 21, and dark hair and a face, a beautiful, young face, the kind of face that comes to this city by the thousands. An hour ago, you wiped that same face out of existence. She smiles, and you smile muscularly, automatically, pick up the package and walk out into the parking lot. At home, You set the bag on the countertop next to two unwashed glasses. You pour a third. The phone on the table is silent, and you wait for it to ring, because it will. They always ring. This machine doesn't sleep, doesn't feel, just produces, and you're the one who cleans. And you'll clean while you can, and then you can't, and then it'll ring again because nobody cares, and you'll pick up the phone because you don't know how to do anything else. You wanted to be the door between two worlds. You became it. And now they walk through you, wiping their feet, and you stand as long as you can stand.